Welcome, everyone, back to the B2B Marketing Influence Podcast. I'm your host, Paula Kiyoki. Today, I am joined by Jonathon Shaevitz, founder of Growth Code IO. Jonathon is focused on assisting companies in unlocking scalable growth through smarter strategy, data, and execution. Jonathon brings a sharp perspective on what's actually working in today's B2B landscape and where most teams are getting it wrong. Welcome, Jonathon.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. I not
We know
yeah,
each other. Come on now.
exactly.
All
Known each
right.
other too long.
Too long, yeah. So let's jump in. Growth Code IO focuses on building scalable growth engines. What gap were you seeing that led you to create it?
So, in terms of the service that we focus on, it really was that most of the publishers that we had worked with in the past, really, as they were contemplating the deprecation of the third-party cookie, and as they were looking at the kind of proliferation of all these new IDs, that most of the publishers didn't have the expertise, or the capital in some cases, or the wherewithal to really leverage what was going on. So our approach was really to say, how do we create a platform that is simple for publishers to deploy, is scalable, and has an immediate ROI for them. And really, that's where we've been focusing. And then subsequently, we've also been working with the buy side, but that's been a kind of a newer endeavor, although it's probably the fastest growing part of our business.
So was it more on the execution side or strategy or both?
Well, when we talk about B2B marketing, there's kind of what we've done to get our clients, and then there's what our service provides to our clients for them. So, which side do you want me to answer?
The service that you provide to them.
Okay. So, in terms of what they're delivering to their clients, the kind of yeah. So, actually, sorry, restate the question.
So I was trying to understand if it's a strategy issue or an execution issue or both on on their part.
I think that most, not just publishers, but most players in the ad tech ecosystem are overwhelmed with the different technology options and trying to understand and parse what's meaningful to them versus just another ad unit, another something.
Mhm.
And so, we really um, w- recognized that we knew the publisher market very well, that they typically were kind of relying on the third party cookie historically, and that they had given away a lot of the control over their own data by allowing the SSPs and the DMPs and kind of all the players to sync that third party cookie, which obviously still goes on. But part of our belief was, strategically, publishers need to control their own data. And then tactically, they can't get reliant upon a single vendor. So when we work with a publisher, typically we're integrating, 20 to 35 different IDs off of a single script that we run for them. And again, what that allows them to do is A, understand which vendors are actually giving them the return they're looking for, and B, um, if they don't like the way a vendor is dealing with their data, they can cut them off without having it be, significant impact to their revenue.
Okay. And then when you're working with them and, because I mean, your name of your company is Growth Code IO, right? Where,
Growth Code. Our website is growthcode.io.
right.
Yeah.
Where do you most often see growth efforts fall apart?
Um, with smaller publishers and with kind of smaller distribution partners, things tend to happen quickly, both good and bad, right? They make a decision, they test, they move forward. With some of our larger, more enterprise level deployments, the challenge tends to be in coordination issues. So, we're in a real world example right now of doing an integration with a large SSP, and the team we were working with went from kind of 4 people that were on the product and engineering side to what's now about 12 or 13, including more legal people, a bunch of product
Mhm.
managers and project managers. And so the coordination and execution often they kind of get in their own way. We know what we
Sure.
need to do. We know what works. We have a lot of history now over the last 3.5 years of delivering value. But again, legal and privacy issues are always paramount, should be paramount, but they tend to, again, slow things down, and time kills all deals. So I
Yeah.
think that's our biggest challenge. And then the other thing
Time or legal.
that's both. But I think the other part is, things are just moving so quickly. So,
Mhm.
um, we just working on a contract, and we originally proposed it in January. We will close it this month. That's a relatively short sales cycle. Our
That is
pricing
short.
has gone through two full iterations in that 4 month period. We've simplified our pricing. We've added a couple of new capabilities that are now new services that we offer, and so again, this market is moving so quickly. We're just beginning to incorporate all the agentic signals into what we do for the publishers, which is going to create a whole nother set of opportunities for them, but another set of decisions that again, we need to create a very simplified um, structure so that they understand this. When they don't understand it, it's our fault of making it too complex. And I think that that's something that a lot of ad tech companies suffer from. They know their own technology so well that they want to talk about all the bells and whistles, and what the publishers or the buyers care about is execution and performance.
So let's talk about the agentic a little bit, because I haven't talked to you in a few months anyway, at least easily. How are you incorporating that into this process when you're working with them? That because that's interesting.
Yeah. So we kind of think about the agentic piece in two different ways. One, our own productivity, and then separate, creating tools that the publishers can leverage to improve performance. So in terms of our own productivity, we went hard in the last couple of months into forcing everyone in our organization to start with an AI tool for almost anything that they do. Um, we just last week told our engineering team that they can't start by writing code anymore. So when we give them a PRD, a product requirements document,
Did they panic?
two of them did. The two older ones were like, "What?" Um, and the younger ones were like, "I'm already doing this."
Okay, awesome,
um,
awesome.
but I will tell you, the, the the value that we get, particularly from our more experienced team members, is that when the tool, typically Cloud Code, but they use many
Mhm.
tools, spits out the kind of first pass, their ability to read it, interpret it, and leverage and edit it and update it, because they've done this so many times, they have just a kind of a better basic command. I think the interesting challenge that we recognize for our engineers is we're asking them to understand the business impact of different decisions, so that when they're setting up a task within a tool and an AI tool, that they are thinking not just about what it has to do according to an execution string, but about how that's going to interact and impact a bunch of other things. And that's a new skill. And the ones that are mastering it, unfortunately, we have a great team. They're all mastering it, but that's a skill that kind of moves them more into a strategic role and less into what I would think of as kind of a hands-on keyboard role.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then as it relates to the agentic tools we're building for our publishers, the reality is that there's a ton of VC money that's come into this behind agentic. There's a ton of agentic DSPs and agentic signal and all of these other things, but there's actually very little money being spent. And so we're trying to balance building that capability for our publishers, making it easy, but not asking them to pay for something that isn't going to have an ROI in the next quarter or two. And it feels a little bit like 2010 all over again, where
Okay,
everyone I meet just got 5, 10, $15 million in a seed round funding,
okay.
but they don't have a product and they don't have a customer. And so we are much more kind of conservative in the sense that our publishers, they need to make money, right? That is
Mhm,
their
mhm.
job. Our buying clients, they need to execute their campaigns more effectively, and they need to get better data in order to do that. And so, we tend to stay relatively short-term focused on how do we impact, this quarter and next quarter, not what are we doing 3 years from now.
Right. Well, and God knows what it's gonna look like 3 years from now
Exactly.
anyway,
It's moving
right?
so fast.
So when you enter Jonathan, when you enter a new engagement, what are the first 2 to 3 signals that you analyze?
So when we enter an engagement with a publisher, it's not kind of just 2 to 3 signals. We have a pretty well trod path of we have a script. Once the publisher installs it, we know typically within 24 to 72 hours, is it performing? Is it delivering the kind of number of IDs and uplift and other types of signals that we know kind of our average benchmark should be? And if it's not, what's not working, right? So it's not kind of one or two, it's really here's what's working. And then what often happens is once things are up and running, then our partners will come back to us and say, hey, I've been thinking about. So we had one recently say, hey, I've been thinking about using your signals to create a price flooring strategy, using the user data to create a price flooring strategy. And so, we we think that that's in our purview. We should be delivering them those signals so that they can build that themselves. But we think of ourselves as data infrastructure, and so our job is to deliver that. So that's where things get interesting, where they come back to us with those types of requests, and we need to think about not only how do we organize the data we currently have to fulfill it, but what does that mean given all these agentic tools of what else we could do to make that more effective for them.
Okay. And then when you're in the engagement, and you're working with these teams, are there things that jump out that potentially most of them overlook, that's readily apparent to you?
It's not that most of them overlook it. I think that what we find is that no one is vanilla, right? Everyone
Okay,
has something that's unique about them that whether it's kind of a straight up sports publisher of which we have literally hundreds of sports sites that we work with. Um,
okay,
they all think about the world differently. Some of them lean more into newsletters and subscriptions. Some of them lean more into updating their content in kind of real time in order to maximize the value of a page. And so there's a kind of that type of tuning that initially is kind of custom, and then we have to make the decision as to whether that's going to become a feature in a future release. And typically, that's what we're really focused on is incorporating that feedback and then spreading the value across our network.
okay. And obviously, you do data-driven decisions, we know that. So what signals are companies underutilizing today, do you think?
Um, it's very clear that the different IDs, certain IDs perform better than others, and certain combinations of IDs perform better than others. And the typical thing that we see when we talk to a publisher is, they'll say, "Oh, I'm already running these 4 ID modules, and I'm already syncing with this, this SSP." And what we say to them is, "Look, all of our research says that um, you need at least 7 IDs in the bid request for it to have a significant lift, but it's not the same 7 in any given instance, but it typically is 7. And, so we know more is better. We're getting better at, last year, our kind of mantra was increase our publisher base and increase the number of signals we deliver. This year, it's really much more about increasing the quality of the signal that we
Quality.
deliver and make sure that the people that ultimately are absorbing that, which is, a DSP or an SSP or some other platform understands and can consistently um, absorb that information.
I
And so
agree.
that's a lot of what we think about right now when we think about signals is yes, certain new signals we're going to add, but making the consistency of those signals just higher, working more closely with all of our different partners to make sure we're giving them what they need so they can give us back what performs better. And so that's definitely a challenge given the regulatory environment is constantly changing. The CCPA drop
Right.
requirements are kind of mid-flight. We're dealing with that right now. So that backdrop of these unique regulatory requirements against what most of the publishers and our buyers say is, I just want to be more effective. We need to be the ones that are making sure that those different layers are respected.
Well, we're hearing the same thing. So, for years, it was breadth and depth of the data, the reach, how much
Right.
can we get out there, blah, blah. And now we're hearing, we really want quality. We really want to know we're reaching the right audience. It's the right context. It's the right functions and titles and so, to get the ROI to be greater. So from your perspective, how does growth code help them get better on the quality?
First of all, it's very hard for a publisher to know if one signal has higher quality than the next.
Okay.
So part of our job is the fact that we see, literally billions of transactions a day. So we can create benchmarks. We can identify when things are out of alignment and communicate that back to the publisher. And oftentimes we just had a situation again where somebody had a consent management platform and they configured it that every user was in Virginia. It was a
How could that be?
misconfiguration, but we had zero performance because everyone was in Virginia and we couldn't quite figure that out. It took us a little bit of time. Once we figured it out and told them what that was, they could make the correction of the problem. The fact that they were working with one of the largest consent management platforms and they let them set it up this way, shame on them on both sides.
Right.
Um, but again, part of our job is to identify those outliers, and usually the correction will come if the user knows what the outlier is, but it's so hard for them to filter out that noise. And so, again, our job is to just make sure that we're communicating that both um, the information itself and communicate it in ways that they understand. And that's the other area where kind of agentic is beginning to come into play, where we can easily use our tools to create a custom report that is the exact answer to a question a publisher is asked or the exact answer to a question a DSP is asked, as opposed to this is the standard output. And so that's really helping them because they can use natural language to ask those questions of our tools. They can just say, show me the performance of this ID versus that on these sites with this
Mhm.
browser in this this country over this time period, and it will create that on the fly. They don't need to figure out our reporting engine, and it just gives them the ability to, as I said, kind of ask those questions on the fly. And then they've got an answer and say, oh, now add this because they'll see something. So we, again, our job is to make it easier to make all of those connections for them. They have the expertise. They are the domain experts. Our job is to kind of capture and organize the information for them.
But that's a big job.
It's a big job. In some ways, it's
And an important job.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's part of the nature of the industry that we're in. There's too much data that is inconsistent. And
Mhm.
again, talking about AI and agentic tools, we can normalize data much faster at a much lower cost than we could in the past. So we're able to provide those types of kind of normalized data points that they can interpret. And again, they are domain expertise. They have the domain expertise. They can do what they need to do if they know what the problem is or what the opportunity is.
So let's talk about attribution. With attribution being so messy, how should leaders rethink what's actually driving performance?
Um, I mean, attribution is messy. It was always messy, but when the third party
Hmm.
cookie was dominant, it clearly was easier to at least connect the dots, even if the connections weren't always as clear and as strong as you wanted. We're beginning to see kind of two different approaches. One is we're beginning to see people use these first party data signals to connect to the back end. So it's kind of using a different set of signals, but to replace the third party cookie for a similar function, namely, somebody landed on a page, they saw an ad, they then bought a product or did some activity and connecting those dots, but not using the cookie, but using a different signal. We think that that's very valuable and useful. Um, there was a scale issue with the third party cookie. Um, there's still a scale issue and a bigger scale issue with these newer tools. And then at the totally the other end is we're seeing people say, "Hey, I don't need to know exactly what worked, exactly how I connected the dots. I can let my AI engine figure this stuff out for me, and it will run dozens, hundreds, or thousands of tests in real time to optimize performance. And yes, that may begin to tie back to attribution in some meaningful way. But at the end of the day, why the reason I want attribution is to understand my investment dollars working. If I know
Mhm.
my investment dollars are working because I'm seeing an increasing kind of return on ad spend, then I don't necessarily need to tie each data point together and connect all of those dots. So we are definitely seeing people say, "Oh, I'm not going to worry about those dots. I'm going to worry about how is my spend organized? What?" And again, this goes back to signal quality and strength. What signals can you consistently send me that I can use to optimize against? And I'll use what I can because, what used to be somebody was, a man, they lived in a city, they were married, they owned a car, and they had kids. So it was this very reductive approach to
Mhm.
now it's, how many vectors does this person kind of live in? We typically track somewhere between 750 and
Wow.
1,400 different vectors. If we can pass all of those data points to the buying agent, they now have the bandwidth. Again, this is all AI. They have the bandwidth to absorb that and actually optimize against it. And so that's kind of the direction we see the attribution going in both of those directions. One, just give me more data and I'll optimize without worrying about specific attribution.
Mhm.
The other, starting to use some of these new um, IDs and data elements to actually do what I'll call more traditional attribution.
So do you find that approaching it that way is a easier, more simpler way for them to get involved without overhauling everything?
Um, I think that the old adage, 50% of my advertising works. I don't know which 50%.
I
Um,
remember that.
and, the promise of digital was I could market to a single person and I could trace them all the way through their entire journey. And so that 50% was supposed to get smaller. And I think by and large it has, although, more fraud, more MFA sites, there's always more supply of advertising inventory than demand. Um, so you may still have that 50%
Mhm.
problem. It's a different 50%. But again, I'm not sure where this is going to land, but I think the companies that are leaning into using these new agentic tools to do this type of optimization, and again, the dollars being spent here is still so small, it's hard to draw any significant conclusions. But we're just our sense is that um, the AI engine itself will figure a bunch of these things out, and the need to tie every single element together is going to kind of get more diffused as the quality of the initial signal and of the final signal gets better.
Okay. That's reasonable. Excuse me, reasonable to me.
We'll see.
And we'll see, right? And then, like you said, it's changing fast.
Yeah.
In respect to B2B, how should companies rethink audience targeting and segmentation? Talking over myself today.
Um, I think part of this is that it used to be this very reductive. I want to chart,
Mhm.
CIOs who work for Fortune 500 companies who are interested in a certain subject, and they would buy data from one of a few sources and they would target. I think what we're seeing kind of people go to is to say, what's the objective of the campaign, right? I want to
Mhm.
get more people to read this article, to buy this product, whatever the objective is, and letting these AI tools kind of figure out how to optimize getting to that objective. It means that the objectives actually have to be more well thought through and in some sense more subtle because you'll often have multiple overlapping objectives. It's not just how many people signed up to test drive a car. You can look at things over a longer life period. And again, the cost of all of this data analytics, this data analysis has come down so much that I can look at a lot more data points. So again, our sense is that that's where the change is occurring, and we're going to continue to kind of witness that. And we think that the advertisers who are really kind of focused on this and beginning to lean in, again, they're going to have to build some new systems, but the cost of those developments are dropping so rapidly because of the tool set itself that you know we think things are moving in a good direction. But the reality is that as you know, almost every day, what you can and can't do with AI and which engine is going to propel you the furthest and the fastest is changing. And so just the ability to keep up with all of that is really a challenge.
It is a challenge, I totally agree. We're experiencing the same thing. So, where do you see the role of external data partners evolving in modern growth strategies?
Um, there's always going to be a class of users on both ends of the kind of the sell side and the buy side who either have a not invented here ethos, so they're going to build everything themselves, or actually really do have the technical expertise to build them themselves well. Those two are not always the same. We see a lot of companies saying we're going to do it ourselves, and then they're back at us, 6, 9, 12 months later because they failed. Um,
Mhm.
we definitely think that the market is going to continue to try to do things themselves. There's always a portion of that, and there's a lot of still wait and see, given how fast things are changing, given the talk of all these agentic tools, but the reality, not a lot of spend occurring yet. There's value to wait and see, and so again, from our perspective, it's how do you simplify this process? How do you make it understandable, and how do you deliver increased performance kind of day one that you don't have, 6 months to ramp up anymore. You're lucky if you have
Mhm.
6 weeks, and sometimes it's six
Mhm.
days.
Yep. Totally agree with you on that too. Can you share with us a quick example where a small shift unlocked meaningful growth?
Sure. We have a publisher, small, relatively small sports publisher. They have
Mhm.
about 10 million unique visitors from the U.S. a month, so that's kind of the size.
Okay.
Um, They leaned heavily into creating a series of customized newsletters around specific sports
Okay.
vertical, and they went from their base when they started, about 1 to 2% of their users had registered for a newsletter, so they had first party data on them. They're up to about 25%. When a publisher has first party data, we know that the value of that user on site goes up by between 25 and 200%. It's 25% if they just come with their normal visitation patterns, but we have those registration data points to add to the data. If they can figure out how to engage them, the 200% comes because they're visiting the site that much more often. So that was a very subtle shift on their part of saying, we're going to take what used to be considered kind of the excess inventory that will sell for a few cents or not fulfill it all, and really driving hey, we have this newsletter, you read 5 articles about, golf this week. Why don't you sign up for our newsletter? And and then following the math of how those customers perform and really figuring out what the acquisition costs need to be, how do they improve the actual value that the customer receives, and how in turn does that translate into increased money. And it was a relatively subtle shift in that they had the space on the page already, and they just decided to invest in their own technology, and it has been extraordinarily powerful change in terms of their economics because they're making that much more money on what has actually been a smaller base than it was a few years ago, due to combination of obviously Google search as well as just AI answering certain types of questions that the people would have gone to the site for in the past. And they've been able to not just maintain, but actually grow their revenue top line and their margin by this type of engagement. And it's not that it didn't cost them anything, but it was not a significant lift.
Mhm. Mm. Maybe you should get a percentage of that.
Again, our belief is this is their data. And again, part of our ethos and part of what we think about
Mhm.
the market is, of course, we want to make money. We want to, we
Sure.
charge a fair price, but we don't want to create a toll system in which somebody has
Yeah.
to pay our toll just to do what they naturally do. And
Right.
so, we think of ourselves as we're only as good as yesterday's performance, right? Who cares what happened last month? You have to keep it
Yep. Yep.
every day. And so,
Yep.
we try to a big part of our kind of go to market strategy for publishers is we know what our core offering is. How do we deliver surplus value to them? We've been building a very sophisticated analytics package, which I talked about, We're seeing more and more engagement by the publishers and by the way, we have SSPs that are logging into our data analytics systems in order to understand their own performance. So, these aren't even customers of ours, but we
Mhm.
available to them. And so, we think that that's the right ethos. And you can't, if a dollar is spent by the public, by the advertiser, and only, 30, 40 cents is getting to the publisher, we're always going to have a breakdown in terms of the health of our kind of the open web. And going back to the attribution question, if I want to retarget somebody, it's so much easier for me to retarget them in Meta than it is to do it in the open market, but I get no data about them. A-
Right.
and,
Yes.
and my acquisition costs are high, but I
Mhm.
really do understand that because it's very clear what I'm paying for. Whereas when I do it in the open market, it's not always as clear. So that's part of this other equation of how do you give both sides better information so that they can do that type of acquisition, and really make it more effective and more efficient.
It's a lot going
It is
on.
a lot.
So where do you what is a common investment the companies that you work with that rarely delivers ROI and maybe they don't even know it?
Um, I won't name any names, but there's a lot
Okay.
of publisher tools out there that promise a lot in terms of whether it's flooring or whether it's the ad unit optimization or those types of things that um, they do perform well for some customers, but they don't perform well for a reasonable chunk of customers. But the way that they deliver the data makes it very hard to evaluate their performance. So we see that a lot. And again, it's natural, right? We're all trying to build something and make money off of it. But it's frustrating when we see publishers sign up. And we often will go onto a site and we'll say to the customer, oh, by the way, you're already running this module from this ID company, you're running this module from this ad block recovery service, you're running this, and this. And they installed those 2 or 3 years ago, and the people that made the decision to do it are gone. And
Okay.
so, they don't even know what's running. They don't know who they're sharing data with. They don't know kind of what's working. And so, again, trying to create something that's simplified for them, we think is just needs to be part of the overall ecosystem, not
I mean,
just something that we
that's
do.
some good forensics to get in there and they don't even know what they have, what they don't have, right? So I can see that. And
Yeah.
especially the bigger the company, the probably the worse it is.
It's amazing. Even small companies,
Really?
we'll see sometimes when we set up a site and we go live, that we run a little diagnostics on them the next day, and we'll see errors, thousands of errors firing on a page. Now, there's always a significant number of errors, but
Mhm.
thousands. We'll see hundreds of different things loading, slowing down the page load speed, impacting their Google score. Um, and again, they're not aware of it. It's kind of hidden, and they're worried about they don't even know exactly what is happening. So they're worried if they turn something off, it may have a downstream impact that they don't understand. Um, but again, you're talking about that CMP that was everyone was from Virginia. You know, that's just that's bad deployment on the part of the vendor. It's
Mhm.
bad deployment on the part of the publisher. Um,
Mhm.
it it it's not our business to solve partners consent management, but when we see zero performance, we need to at least understand why that is. And so um, people are moving fast and a lot of things keep getting broken, but it's kind of like legislation. Something gets legislated, it never gets revisited. Something gets installed, it never gets revisited. We're definitely kind of believers of we got to keep the site as clean as possible. And
Mhm.
the publishers that we work with that do that, they make a better return on investment. Um, you know, I, also just a pet peeve of mine is people measure the wrong thing. They measure, oh, your eCPM went up. Yeah, but my number of ad units went down, so my overall revenue didn't, perform. So everyone optimizes what the number is that they're measuring, and of course, everyone wants to put their best foot forward, but um, publishers need to make sure that they understand what the metric is that they care about and what they're going to and how they're going to measure that metric.
And I would think with the work that you do that ultimately that transcends down to the advertisers and the people that are ending up on their websites getting more value for dealing with that publisher.
Absolutely. And,
Right.
and I mean, we haven't really talked about what we do for buyers, but we're doing a tremendous amount of work with DSPs and agencies, basically building their own um, currency, their own ad ID,
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
user ID, um,
Mhm.
using these kind of first party signals and getting them installed across a wide variety of publishers and being able to transact against their own data more effectively. And we see a lot of that kind of coming in the future. The amount of inbound from large enterprises who are recognizing that they are paying way too many fees, whether it's for
Mhm.
attribution or for fraud or for targeting or for audience. There's too many people taking that bite out of the cookie that their spend isn't as effective as it needs to be. And we definitely see that continuing to evolve. And obviously, agencies, the pricing model, if they are always paid as a percentage of spend, their incentives aren't necessarily aligned. But we're seeing a lot of that, not a lot, but we're seeing change there as well, in which
Okay.
agencies are just saying, "Hey, I can't just expect to spend more and make more money every year."
Well, one of the things I've read recently regarding the agencies is that now that we have the AI, that as you mentioned, more hands on keyboard, that they're not going to be as necessary because
No,
AI can optimize it, and that they're really going to be more involved on the strategic side and making money, being
yeah,
strategy focused.
yeah.
And I would think part of that strategy would be along the lines of what we just talked about here.
Agencies need custom. They need unique um, supply. They need to be able to create custom audiences off of unique signals. It can't just be, I want to target a particular gender. I want to target a particular age
Mhm.
group. They need to be doing kind of unique things. And then they need to take all of that data and figure out how it's flowing down. And that's what we hope is happening. And we certainly see more of these agencies say, I can't charge this 20% overhead. How do I create value that
Mhm.
my actual brands that I represent, I'm increasing the return on their spend, but I'm maintaining my overall value and margin. And
Yep.
so the ones that are leaning in, and I think a lot of the kind of small to mid-sized independent agencies are going to do very well because the cost of these tools is relatively low. Um, and they can move fast and kind of break things, whereas some of the largest, again, we're dealing with a lot of the Holcos right now, and one of them came to us recently and said, we had a they had a directive from on high to kind of deploy a series of AI tools. It failed, and so now they're behind. So they've lost
Oh,
months, and in this market, months matter. You know,
oh
it's
yeah.
and so the larger companies, they have lots of smart people. They will figure this out, but it's harder for them to kind of turn
Yeah, I think we're at kind of a pivotal point for their business model,
for
you
sure.
know, over the
Yeah.
next year or so.
Although we've been saying that for a long time, that the
That's true.
agency business model is
But
not
that
gonna
was
survive.
before AI. That was
Yeah,
before AI,
but
Jonathan.
again, they're smart people, they figure out how to keep their margin,
Mhm.
but I think
True.
that the way that they will keep it will not be based just upon the number of hours as it has in the past and try to get more hands on keyboard. That's not
Yep.
the way the market's gonna work.
Totally agree with you. So I have one last question for you.
Okay?
If you had to distill growth code into one core principle, what would it be?
More cleaner signal with more clean, consistent signal from
Okay.
both the buyer and the seller. Yeah, that if we can give them better, higher quality, higher quality, more frequency, and they can rely on it, we think that we will succeed for both sides of the market.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Jonathan,
Thank you,
this was
Paula.
great. I learned more than I already knew. Thank you.
Excellent. Good.
Appreciate you joining the podcast.
All right.
That's it for today's episode of B2B Influence. If you picked up something new or found yourself rethinking your approach, take a second to subscribe, leave a quick comment, and share this episode with your network. And don't forget, once we hit 25,000 subscribers, one lucky listener will win a free customer analysis. Just subscribe and comment to enter. If you want to be a guest or know someone pushing the boundaries in B2B marketing, tap the link in the show notes to nominate or apply. And if you're ready to fuel smarter campaigns and more accurate targeting, check out what we're doing at OMI.